It's like these left-wing ideas. It's like every generation has to learn once again that these left-wing ideas make life worse. It is just amazing that we have to keep learning this. And you ask yourself, what is the appeal of these failed ideas? Why do they keep coming back? And I think it's what I call big think. It's the idea that somehow somebody, some expert, some central authority, maybe just the government in general, can get this great grasp over the big system that's going on and fix it. He's going to fix it's that big system. I'm going to quote myself. I wrote a novel, it was published in 1998 called The Uncanny. And one of the heroes of The Uncanny remarks, she says, "Little minds think great thoughts, but great minds proceed in the smallest stages." And I genuinely think that remark is true, that these people have this idea that they have this great picture of the world and they can adjust things, and if they can just turn this knob and turn that, and the little people in there don't really matter. See, I have this theory that the modern world of republicanism, of individual freedom, of capitalism, came into being in the wake of the discoveries of Isaac Newton. People don't really realize what a shock to the Western system the discoveries of Isaac Newton were, because they suddenly realized that God wasn't sitting around adjusting each little thing. He wasn't moving the planets with his hand. He wasn't doing each thing. He didn't have to. He made the world to work. And I think that kind of led over the decades and centuries to the idea that maybe the human world could work as well. Maybe that opened the human mind to this idea that, an informed public could go about their business, and that would raise all ships, and and the market would work, and all this. That they didn't need a king like the King of Heaven to play with each little thing and to tell people what to believe and what to think, and life would work much better. There would be fewer wars, there would be less fighting, there'd be less oppression if people just did what they did. But mankind repeats the original sin just like human beings repeat the traumas of their youths. People who were abused in youth have themselves abused. People who had mean moms sometimes find mean wives. People repeat the traumas of their youths compulsively, and I think we repeat original sin. Remember, the original sin was that we wanted to be the determinants of good and evil, and we wanted to play God. And I think people want to play God, and they don't like the fact that God made a world of freedom. They want to make sure that they're playing God, and they're going to adjust every little thing. 2 years ago, I gave a speech at Boston College, and a riot started. And literally, the police had to hustle me. I wouldn't leave until all the questions were over. But afterwards, the police hustled me out, and the people were just screaming. There's all these angry children, essentially. It wasn't their fault. The administration, with the help of a tremendously dishonest reporter on the school newspaper, had incited them by quoting me out of context. They did it again like 2 weeks ago. They looked back on this and blamed the Republicans, the college Republicans, for inviting me in. That's what caused the riot. It wasn't the rioters. It wasn't the fact that the faculty and the administration had pumped stupidity into these kids' heads. It was my fault for having an opinion that disagreed. And this is what they wrote just a couple of weeks ago. They wrote, in November 2019, Boston College Republicans sponsored Andrew Klavan, who has promoted Islamophobia and claimed that European culture is superior to all other cultures. And he adds, these speakers actively discriminated against people, which is harmful to the affected populations, and created a hostile, divisive environment on campus. What a bunch of garbage. But anyway, their idea is that I said something wrong, that I'm Islamophobic. Islamophobic is just a propaganda word, but I disagree with Islam. I'm a Christian. I think they're wrong about the nature of God in many, many ways, but also I have wondered aloud, and I've questioned whether some of the tenets of Islam are antithetical to Western ideas, like, for instance, the need for theocracy, Sharia law, and I've questioned whether some of the ideas in Islam might lead to the kind of violence of Islamism. I know there are millions and millions of lovely Muslim people. It has nothing to do with that. I've questioned the ideas. But their idea is, of course, this idea of racism, this idea of intersectional oppression. They have this big idea that if they can just move this person here and that person, it's all going to, they don't want to question the little details. When it comes to my comments about Europe, those were comments that were lifted out of my autobiography, my memoir, The Great Good Thing, where I said that the nations of Europe, from the Renaissance to the First World War, produced more of mankind's greatest artistic achievements than any others. That was the comment. And I won't go on to say I despise racism. This is not about race. It's not a moral question. It's just that as the discoveries and calculus, reading from the book, as the discoveries and calculus of Newton are more important scientific breakthroughs than anything that came before or since, as the Constitution of the American founders is the most profound piece of distilled political wisdom in all history, it makes simple sense that the artistic culture that underlay those advances that involved Shakespeare and Keats and Bach and Mozart, Michelangelo and Raphael, Cervantes and Dickens, all those things, that this was one of the greatest cultures that ever existed on earth. And the final line of this is, this has nothing to do with whether these people were nice or decent or did good things. It only concerns the objects they made and left behind. Now, the left has this big think idea that somehow it's evil to talk about this because it's racial. All these people were white. Now, of course, they weren't all the same race. There were Spanish and French and British and, and German, all these different races, in fact, but they all had the same color. And in big think that's what matters. It's all about the color. So there's something wrong with saying one culture is better than another when I just think this is part of the human race. By the way, they weren't my race. I'm an Ashkenazi Jew. I had nothing to do. Our race, many of these people hated my race, but they think, oh, they've got it. It's the secret ingredient is the epidermis. If you've ever read Thomas Sowell is so brilliant. And the reason Thomas Sowell is so brilliant is because he has common sense. He's not like, I don't know what his IQ is. I have no idea. But all he has is so much common sense that he's brilliant. And he talks about the fact that, for instance, Western culture in the West, in Europe, they had horses, they had oxen. So the Mayans invented the wheel, but they couldn't do anything with it. They invented the wheel. They put it on toys. They put it on children's toys. But in the West, in Europe, they could put it on carts because they had draft horses and oxen that would pull the carts. They could move material from place to place. They had navigable rivers, which you don't have in Africa. They could get from place to place. And they had great ideas. They had that Christian collision of Christianity with Aristotle and Plato, which became Thomas Aquinism, and so shaped the thinking of the West and led to the prominence of reason and led to the freedoms that came after and kind of led to the ideas that made the West more free. Other cultures rose, like China rose, the Muslim culture rose, but they sank back again. And these were things that helped the Western culture, the culture of Europe, move forward. Little things, details, accidents. It can't be about genetics, because remember, the people who built Europe were the barbarians to the Greeks. These are the people that the Greeks and Romans called the barbarians. They would have said, oh, these are lesser races. But of course, there are no lesser races. Just so many accidents play into what happens in history. But they have this big think idea, this simple answer to complex questions that gives them the sense that they can have control of things. And it's all connected. Like racism, it always leads to racism because racism is a typical idea. But all of these things are connected. The big think is kind of a virus that connects all things. What is our idea? What is the conservative idea? It's that each individual doing what he does will lift everybody up, that the world is made to work, that God made the world to work. Yes, because we live in original sin, because we're broken, we need laws to protect one another, to protect us from each other, so I don't cheat you or rob you or kill you. But we don't need people to lift up, to control the market. We don't need people to control our thoughts. We don't need people to control our language, to tell us what we can say. We don't need people knocking us off Twitter for putting forward things. We don't need to manipulate information to make sure you do what we want you to do. We just give you the information. We just teach you to think and then let you think for yourself, and the world is a better place. I just want to play, just to end this idea, I want to play one video that just really got me. This is Patrisse Cullors, who was a founder of Black Lives Matter. And she met a student who was at a book sale who was working to stop an anti-illegal immigration bill and was looking at her books. And this is what he said and how she reacted. This is cut one.
I was at the art publications table today, and I was speaking to this young person from Arizona who's trying to fight SB 1070. And he grabbed a book and he said, it's like Mal's Red Book. And I was like, man, that's what I was thinking. And it was just really cool to hear him make that connection. I was like, how about you buy like 10 to 15 of these books and you all have like a youth organizing group where you talk about it and you really try to engage this. And we can just we need to build off of this.
She loved his cool. He compared me to Mao, who slaughtered tens of millions of people. And you know how Mao slaughtered people? He slaughtered them by telling them how much food they could grow in their ground, right? So that he destroyed the earth, he destroyed the food industry. People starved to death. He created a famine. He didn't mean to create a famine. He just said, because this is communism, we need to produce this much food, therefore you have to produce this much food. And people started, lying about how much food they were producing, and it created this terrible famine that caused tens of millions of people. The racism of Black Lives Matter, and it is racism, and there's racism on the right too. You get big thinkers on the right as well. The racism of Black Lives Matter and the big think of controlling the economy, they go together. They fit together. Our idea, the idea that we are defending, is the idea of freedom, that means some people are going to do bad things. It means some people are going to think bad things. It means some people are not going to like other people. It means some people are not going to want to associate with other people. But it also means that each person is going to produce what he thinks will make his life better and make all of our lives better in the process. It's the little things. It's little people doing little things that makes the world work. We do not need some human God to control us all. Big think is evil. Liberty is the antidote, where we just teach people what they need to know and let each one go his way.